Glock versus M&P. I think you should have one of each.
I'm Kyle Lamb with Viking Tactics. I get a lot of calls about the gun I shoot, which is a Smith and Wesson M&P 9mm, and this is the VTAC version. And really the only difference there is it's cat crap brown and it's got the VTAC sights on it, which are both nice enhancements. Okay, but the question I get is, why do I like the M&P over the Glock? Well, I'll tell you what, that may not be the fact. I've actually got a Glock 35 here in 40, and I've got one of my other Glocks, which is a Glock 26 right here in 9mm. So I want to go through a couple of different things on these guns so you understand what's good and what's bad about each pistol, because there's a lot of issues with both guns, but there's also a lot of great things about both guns. So if you're going to pick a 9mm, Glock, M&P, I don't think it really matters. I think the reliability is there with both of these pistols, so I'd say they're a tie right there. Now if you're going to go to 40 Smith and Wesson, then everything changes. If you got a Glock 22 versus an M&P that's in 40 caliber, by far the M&P is a much more reliable pistol. I don't know if it's because the frame is a little bit more flimsy on the Glock than it is on the M&P, but I can tell you from shooting with a lot of federal law enforcement guys that carry the Glock 22 and military folks, I got to tell you, those guns are somewhat finicky. You have to have the Gen 5 mag with the Gen 3 follower with the Gen 2 spring, and there's just so much that goes along with it. If you are shooting 40, this is a 9mm mag, but with the M&P, just grab any Smith & Wesson 40 caliber mag, the gun's going to run. It's not as finicky with the 180 grain bullets, where the Glock is definitely finicky when you go to 180 grain bullets. Okay, so that's reliability. That's probably the most important thing. So 9mm, either gun. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the trigger. Now, what a lot of folks like about the Glock trigger is that they squeeze the trigger and they get a nice reset that you can feel and hear. Okay, so that's what it's like in the Glock. In the M&P, there's a trigger squeeze, there's the reset, which you can't really hear, and that's because the timing of the disconnector and the trigger reset are at different times. In their newer guns, they've tried to fix this so that you get a little bit better, crisper reset. Personally, if you're a Glock shooter, if you shoot an M&P for a few days, you're probably going to start liking the M&P trigger. That's how I was. I like the M&P trigger. I like it better than the stock Glock trigger because of the little piece you've got to pull down in the front of the Glock trigger. I have a good tendency to pinch my fat little finger there whenever I do that. So as far as the trigger goes, the actual trigger squeeze, I'm going to let that go to the M&P. The reset, which the only time I feel that's when I'm in the gun shop, then I'm going to give that to the Glock. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is accuracy. All right, accuracy is very, very important. To me, it's probably not as important as reliability, but you got to be able to hit the broadside of a barn. And sometimes with my M&Ps, I've had a few issues there. What I've done with all of my M&Ps that I use for teaching classes and my carry guns, I've actually put aftermarket barrels in them. Once again, Smith & Wesson has stepped up and they've tried to make their guns a bit more accurate. But I will tell you, straight out of the box, for years and years, the Glocks never let me down as far as accuracy. So in the accuracy side of it, I'm going to give that to the Glock. Shootability. Some folks disagree with me on this, but I'll tell you, shootability wise, on the M&P, you've got a big beaver tail. You get your hand as high as you want, squeeze as tight as you want. Everything's going to be fine because you're not going to slow down or retard the slide movement to the rear. On the Glocks, that's not the case. If I grip really high, there's a good chance that the slide is going to hit my hand. So for the beaver tail side of it, I'm just going to give that to the M&P. So the M&P wins on that side. Shootability wise, man, I got to tell you, when I first picked up the M&P, it took me about a day, day and a half of shooting this gun to really start to like it. It's got a grip angle that's slightly closer to a 1911, and this gun is just really, really easy to shoot. So I guess shootability there, I would definitely give it to the M&P, especially if you're shooting a heavier caliber. 40 Smith & Wesson, you can shoot an M&P all day, your hands aren't going to hurt. Well, they might hurt slightly, but you're not going to get that big bump on your knuckle like you get from the bump on the bottom of the Glock trigger guard there. Okay, what else is there to talk about? Magazines. We've got steel magazines, and then for the Glock, we have the plastic magazines. This has one of the new salient VTAC base pads on it, so that's actually aluminum there. But generally speaking, you have a plastic magazine with a plastic follower with a plastic base pad. In this magazine, you have a plastic base pad with a metal magazine with a plastic follower. And I can just tell you, these magazines from the M&Ps seem to work a lot more reliably. They're a lot faster to load. When it's time to do a speed reload with this gun, it's a lot quicker to seat that magazine than it is. And this one's a little bit sticky on this gun, but you guys get the idea. Okay, lastly, hanging lights off your pistols. If you hang a light off your pistol, the M&P definitely wins in that fight. It seems to me like a lot of folks that try to hang lights off the Glocks, they end up having malfunction issues, rounds nosediving. Some of that is their ammo selection as well, but just if you put a light on a Glock, make sure you test fire it plenty during the day to make sure that your gun's gonna work. And then lastly, I guess, I said lastly before, but now really lastly, made in Austria, made in the United States of America. I don't know. You make the call. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, we've got the zombie gun or the food riot gun. Then I'm picking the Glock. Glock 17 mags are gonna be laying in the street. There's a lot more people out there with Glocks than there are with M&Ps, so right now for the food riots, I'm picking the Glock. If it's not the zombie apocalypse, and by the way, I don't believe in zombies, I'm picking the M&P 9.